Mr. Speaker, it's wonderful to see you. Thanks for joining us at the American Spectator Gala. We're on the cusp of something that could be very interesting that obviously I think you remember a lot of, which is there's a Democrat president whose first 2 years in office are less than optimal. And the American public is doing what the American public often does when Democrats manage to get control of the government, which is something of a reference to the first Alien movie when the thing jumps on the guy's face and he goes, "Get it off, get it off." I think we're kind of at that moment. The polls are beginning to show movement toward the Republicans. So we're looking at potentially, whether they call it a red wave or however you want to term it, a Republican takeover of political power. So given that, I've got some questions because you might be the preeminent expert on this exact political situation in America. First of all, what do you think the outcome of the midterms is going to be? Is it a wipeout red wave? Is it a disappointment for Republicans? How do you see it coming?
Between +3 and 7 in the Senate, and between +20 and 50 in the House. The most likely House number is 44.
Okay, so 44 would put you above 250 House members. That's a massive, massive Republican takeover.
It would be the largest, I think, since 1920.
Right. I mean, it's not the number that you guys generated in 1994, but you weren't coming from the position that...
We started from a very low base.
Right.
And Kevin did such a great job in 2020 where they supposedly were going to lose 25 seats. They gained 15. That's a swing of 40 from the Washington experts.
Sure.
So they have the highest base any Republican Party has had going into this kind of an election since 1918.
Okay, I have written that we are at the end of a political era that began in 1932 with FDR's election over Herbert Hoover, and that a lot of the assumptions about government in America no longer necessarily apply. Can we take anything from that analysis and apply it to the midterms and the possibilities that Kevin McCarthy and the House and the Republicans in the Senate might have to move things in a different direction from where they've been the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the Democrats have thrown away the Roosevelt majority. The 2/3 of Americans who've not gone to four-year colleges are now overwhelmingly Republican. The Americans who've gone to graduate school are overwhelmingly Democrat. That is a reversal of the world of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Increasingly, Latinos are discovering they deeply dislike the Democratic Party. I just did
For cultural reasons as much as political.
Exactly.
Right.
Both things are happening. I just did a podcast today with Tulsi Gabbard about why she left the Democratic Party. And her reasons are as much cultural as they are anything.
Right.
I mean, she said, you know, I used to belong to a party that protected women, and now it's become a party that can't even define what a woman is.
Right.
It sort of captured the whole thing in one sentence.
Sure.
I don't think the Democrats can put their coalition back together. The question will be whether or not the Republicans can find the skills and the patience and the endurance to pass enough positive legislation that people decide they're part of a new majority. We had a long stretch from basically, I would say, 1876 to 1896, where things were just in turmoil. We had a long stretch before that between 1836 and 1860 where things were in turmoil. So you could have 20 years of no natural governing majority and just have a mess. If the Republicans...
You could make the argument we've actually been in that situation since...
Well, to some extent, but the Democrats got a lot done under Obama, whether you liked it or disliked it. The truth is the last great surge, which I think is a suicidal surge, under Biden, they've gotten a lot of stuff done. It's just stuff the American people hate.
Right, right. Well, I was going to ask you, and I think I know what the answer is, but can the Democrats be saved, or is that a
You
party
mean,
that's
you mean
on the way
between
out?
now and the election, or you
Well,
mean?
let's say over the next 3 to 5 years,
Probably
to maybe
not.
10
It'll
years.
be depending on how totally Republicans, I mean, if Republicans totally screw it up,
Right.
then the Democrats might make a comeback. But it's more likely that they're about to enter a period a little bit like the Republicans in the 1930s, where the idea base that dominates their party is so alien from 70 or 80% of the American people that they can't recover maybe for as long as a generation.
Mhm. I think that's fair. All right, what do you think of the commitment to America, and how would you relate that to the contract for America from 1984 or 1994? Rather.
This is the commitment to America.
Okay.
And I think it's more sophisticated than the contract.
Okay.
If you go to committoamerica.com, there are 150 policy proposals.
Mm-hmm.
They actually began, Kevin thinks strategically, and over a year ago, he set up 7 working groups that have been developing these ideas. And he understands that this is a management tool when you're a majority, at least as much as it is a political tool to get to be a majority. So I think they've done a decent job. It's a very different environment from 1994. And I don't think that you could have put together the contract exactly the way we did, because this is so cluttered by the pain levels of crime and inflation and the border and fentanyl and wokeism in schools that it's really very different. We had nothing like the current level of disaster that they're in operating. So I think the existence of the commitment's important. I think there are some places where it broke through. The other disadvantage they have is that when we created the contract, we had a pledge from Haley Barbour, the Republican National Chairman, and he bought 4 pages in TV Guide, which at that time was the largest publication in America. So 90 million homes got the contract. They've had no delivery system comparable to that.
Right.
And we were able to make that a much bigger thing, if you will.
It might not even be available these days because the market within advertising and so forth is so kind of spread out compared to back then. You could do a TV Guide, or you could do the 3 networks and so forth.
Candidly, if you've got inflation, gasoline prices, food prices, crime, the border, nutcake woke behaviors in schools, you have so much stuff to advertise that you say, why would I then, when I've got all these issues, why would I then divert ad money over here to this positive stuff?
No, there's a lot to be said for that. And there was a poll, and I don't remember if it was the Harvard-Harris poll or if it was the New York Times Siena poll, and they did the congressional generic ballot. I think it was Harvard-Harris. They did the congressional generic ballot, and it was +6 GOP. But the really interesting thing in that poll was they polled issues. They said, okay, what are the most important issues to you? Like, what are the top tier issues? And the 3 that came up were immigration and the border, inflation and the economy, and crime.
Right.
Then they asked, what do Republicans care about most? Like the Republicans running for office where you are, like what do they care about? And the 3 issues that popped up top tier were immigration and the border, inflation and the economy, and crime. Then they asked about Democrats, and it was Ukraine, it was abortion, and it was January 6th. And I don't remember, and I've been following politics since 1980, I don't remember a time when one party's perceived priorities lined up so perfectly with the American people's perceived priorities, and the opposite party so totally were divorced from those perceived priorities ever. And that at that point is when I was like, okay, there is going to be a red wave.
Yeah, there will be, but if you are a left-wing Democrat, which is almost synonymous,
there are no moderate Democrats left.
You can't talk about the other issues because you're going to lose on all of them.
Right.
And you can't bring yourself to change. So, they may be occasional tactical maneuvers, but the truth is, Biden and the Democrats created the energy crisis. Biden and the Democrats created the inflation. Biden and the Democrats have deliberately kept the border open and deliberately allowed fentanyl and other things to come in. So and Biden and the Democrats are passionately committed to the worst kind of woke policies in the schools.
Yes.
So they can't find a way to survive in that world. And so they get in a room over here and they say, well, what could we do? We can't do any of these. What could we do? And I think they're living what will become on election night a disastrous fantasy because I don't think any of their issues work.
I mean, if you have a Don Bolduc beating a Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, I mean, Bolduc is a guy you run in Alabama, right? Like not New Hampshire, and if he wins...
But not necessarily in this world.
Right. If he wins, everything you thought you knew about American politics is a little different than what you thought.
Well, but if you didn't come out of 1980, 1994, 2010, and 2016
Right.
and decide that everything you knew about American politics was wrong,
Right.
then you weren't paying attention.
Right.
I mean, the fact is...
And this is 100% that kind of cycle. There's no question
Yeah,
about it.
and so, because what's really happening is people in New Hampshire have more in common with people in Alabama than they do with people at Harvard. And that's what's driving them all into the same place.
Okay. I'm going to make you Kevin McCarthy, and it's January 4th or 5th or whatever next year, and you just swore in everybody in Congress. 3-4 things, like what's got to be done today?
Well, Kevin's been pretty clear. I mean, first, I think he wants to repeal the 87,000 IRS agents.
Absolutely.
I suspect they will pass something on the border to finish the wall. I suspect they will pass something on. He has a very specific idea of creating a basically measurement for district attorneys. And if you are failing to prosecute crime, they cut off all federal funding. But they also educate people back home. This is how bad your district attorney is.
Right.
So I think there'll be 3 or 4 things like that. And again, I think Kevin, I know because I talked to him this morning, I think Kevin is going to be very committed to saying, here's the contract, here's the commitment. All you guys agreed to the commitment.
Right.
And I was with them in Florida when they were planning it, and I was with them when they internally unveiled it the day before they went to Pittsburgh. And they had pretty solid support across the entire party for moving in this direction.
It's a super interesting time. It's in many ways a desperate time. Obviously, the American people have never responded to the right track, wrong track surveys in ways quite where we are now. But those are kind of the periods of time when the Overton window can shift and settle, and you can do some different things. The Chinese, when they said, "May you live in interesting times," that was an insult back in the days. And in a lot of cases, people look at 2022 America as an insult. But I think it's an interesting sort of, we're on the precipice of we're not going to go the same way as we're currently going. We're either going to go full on into the AOC, Bernie Sanders, Gavin Newsom whack job America, or we're going to right ourselves. I think in 3 weeks we're going to see us right ourselves, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see.
Well, I would say in 3 weeks we are going to be given a signal by the American people that they would like us to right ourselves, and then the test for Republicans will be, can you put it together and do it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, look, you're going to have every bureaucracy, every element of power which hated Trump is going to hate the new Republican majority.
Right.
And they have to understand going in, this is going to be a constant turmoil of creating solutions that profoundly change institutions that are going to bitterly oppose the change.
Does the Republican Party have the mettle to withstand the media and, for lack of a better word, deep state resistance to the kinds of changes they want to make?
Ask me that in a year.
It is the question of American politics.
That's right.
For sure.
All this does is it gives you a ticket to get into the dance.
Right.
Then you've got to prove you can dance.
House Speaker Newt Gingrich,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the American Spectator.